Hello, good morning. Today I'm going to be doing a draw with me where I clean up and color a sketch, then I realize I hate it and come back and fix it a month later. This is just for the vibes, but whenever I film, I like to have like candles or incense going. A friend of mine gave these to me for Christmas. They're little incense matchsticks. The scent is pretty intense though, so I burn them in the living room while I'm working in my office. I sometimes try to create a Pavlovian response in myself with different scents. So if I'm working on different types of projects, I'll assign a candle or a scent to each project so that when I light that candle or I smell that thing, it kind of puts my brain in that mode. This is the sketchbook page where I first came up with the idea for the Changeling, which is a little animated short that's up on my Instagram. I'll talk more about the Changeling in just a moment. I'll be cleaning up the sketch on the right using a black Copic marker, a black fine liner, and some highlighters. And then later on you'll see I use some colored pencils to fix some mistakes. These are my nails right now. They're like a sheer red with some silver cyber sigil stuff, like 3D effects. I really like them. They're kind of vampire-esque. I just watched Vampire Hunter D. They remind me of that. I started with doing clean outlines with the black fine liner pen. My style always has like some sketchiness to it, even if it is a really clean look. So here you can see there's still like those lines around the eyes. Even if the overall drawing is supposed to be clean, it's still got a little bit of roughness to it. So going back to the Changeling, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what that is. The Changeling is a short animation that is up on my Instagram and on YouTube as well. It's a YouTube short, and it's a really simple idea. The concept is just about a girl living in a really boring, ordinary town, and she's friends with this guy who tells her that he's a changeling, and she doesn't believe him because she can't fathom that the Fae would leave their child with terrible guardians. So the crux of the story is just, who do you believe? The girl who thinks the boy's a liar, or the boy who says he's a changeling? I think the short just scratches that itch of, how do the Fae choose who to leave their changelings with? And what if they choose wrong? And what happens to the changelings when they grow up? Do they know they're changelings? These were just kind of questions that I had about the changeling mythos. So yeah, I just wanted to do a little short story about those concepts. But from there, it kind of spiraled into a slightly longer story. And I'd love to like do a comic that gets into these two's relationship. I quickly want to mention the Palomino Blackwing pencil. I love drawing with these pencils. I know people hype them up. In my opinion, they are worth the hype. I mean, they just draw so smoothly. If you ever see them, I think sometimes they sell them as singles in art supply stores. Try them out. I don't know, they're just very special and they look so beautiful. But back to the Changeling story. As I was coming up with the longer version of this, I think the relationship that the two of these kids have together is the driving force of it, and that's what made me interested in kind of thinking about a comic version. It's like a them against the world story, and I really love stories like that, but I think it also kind of touches on some fun themes of like a little bit horror. I guess creepy is maybe more accurate. Spooky, and like, is magic real, or is this boy a liar or delusional? Does he believe what he's saying? And is it society that's wrong, or is it the two kids who are misled? Another big inspiration for the story was just like wild times as a kid, you know, setting your eyebrows on fire or whatever, getting hurt in the forest and bleeding everywhere. I think that there's something fun about those times, and I wanted to capture that feeling in art in some way. But I've really enjoyed the process of developing this story, moving from, a little sketchbook page of doodles and writing to kind of get ideas down, and then turning that into a short animation, making music for that animation that kind of fit the vibe. And then from there, planning out like this slightly larger spooky comic And also like getting into drawing little sketches about them and moments that they might have had in their history together. I think that's actually a great way to develop ideas, is like not being so focused on writing down the plot or creating an outline right off the jump, but rather thinking about moments that you would want to see, and drawing those out in little thumbnails or doodles, or writing about those moments. I think that makes the characters feel more real and can help flesh out the plot itself. I spoke a little bit about the questions that inspired the Changeling story, and I really think that questions are a great place to start when you're coming up with short story ideas. What are some unanswered questions you have? I actually get a lot of ideas when I just go on walks around my neighborhood. I see things and they just sort of spark little ideas, unanswered questions or unanswered stories. And then I can formulate like these little horror, creepy short stories kind of around it to give myself an answer. Not everything has to have a complete answer either. You can just explore where that question goes. Obviously, like this one had the initial question of, what happens when a changeling grows up, and that spiraled into a lot of other questions which expanded the story. So I think, unanswered questions are just such a great place to start with ideas for short projects. Weirdly enough, lilies actually became a very important part of this story in the comic version that does not exist yet. But there are a lot of lilies that grow around where I live. They're beautiful. And I think that that's something cool that can happen, is you can see what's around you and they can inspire moments in your story that you don't expect. Which kind of brings me to another point. It's very easy to land on your first idea and go with that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think that something really special happens when you land on a first idea and then you expand on it. You ask more questions, you say, what if the story didn't end here, or what if it took a different direction instead, and come up with other alternatives so that you can kind of find something unexpected to you, even as the author of it. And I think unexpected moments, like those sketches I was talking about earlier of like the two kids and their history together, some of those things inspired moments in the future narrative that I wouldn't have thought of if I hadn't taken that time to just explore and have fun with it. I think that I'm always looking for ways to surprise myself as the creator of something with fresh ideas or fresh direction to take something that I myself would not have come up with from the start of it. And then having the joy and the privilege of deciding if I want to go in an unexpected direction or take it right back to basics and go with my initial first thought. That's something that I have been really enjoying, actually, is not having to cave to pressure to make something entirely new. I think that can be like a weird pressure that actually ruins storytelling sometimes. It's this idea that like you have to make something completely unique. You'll never do it. There's no such thing as a completely new story, I think, at this point. So you might as well make something that really resonates with you and makes you happy. Finding like unique combinations can be super fun when you're making a story, but at the end of the day, you're making it for you, right? So finding that version of the story that has enough new things about it that it's compelling, but has enough familiarity and catharsis in it to make you happy as the creator. Back to the drawing. This is where I started to add in some hard cast shadows in solid black using that black Copic marker. I really like using solid blacks in illustration. I think it creates like such a strong look. I've mentioned before, I feel like I'm quite sketchy when I draw, so laying in some like thick black shadows feels like it grounds my work in some way. Another thing I just wanted to mention about coming up with short stories or putting your writing out there or your stories out there for people to see, I think sometimes we think we need to have all of the answers. And while that can be nice, I don't think that's actually the case. You don't really need to know everything. One of the joys of creating short form stories and spooky stories is that you can leave a lot up to the interpretation of the viewer, and that's actually such a hugely important part of creating art and consuming art. Is what are you bringing into it? When you make something, you bring in your own baggage and your own worldview, and when you watch something, the same is true. You actually bring in so much of yourself when you watch something. You interpret it differently based on your life experiences and who you are. So don't do all the work for somebody. Let them experience the story from their perspective. Obviously, it can be frustrating when our intentions are misinterpreted, but that's kind of what's cool about putting stuff out there. Is like, ultimately, you have no control over your story once it leaves your hands. It goes out to people and they get to decide how they're going to view it, which is beautiful and frustrating. When I watch time-lapse videos of people drawing, this is always the part I look forward to the most, is when they like fill in sections with their markers. It looks so easy when it's sped up, but honestly it takes so long. I went through and I outlined everything with a fine liner just to make sure there was a thin little gap of paper white between the characters and that sort of black background. And that took forever. And then filling it out with a marker as well took quite a bit of time. I was trying to be careful, but also, again, I don't want to be too precious with it, you know? I want to have fun with it. So I definitely messed up and just moved on at points. Back to the idea of like developing short stories, developing the Changeling and other stuff like it. I find that so much of what we put into stuff as creators is like relevant to our real lives, not in like a one-to-one correlation way, but I think we work through our internal worlds by creating pieces of art that reflect what we're trying to figure out. And so don't be worried if you keep revisiting the same topics or themes. I think that's actually just our brains trying to work things out, trying to wrestle with themes and ideas, the things that we haven't been able to figure out in our real lives yet, or maybe we have and we're not happy with the results. And we get to explore, like we mentioned before, with questioning in our short stories, we get to explore those questions about our real lives through art. So yeah, don't be surprised if you want to revisit the same ideas again. This is the beginning of the end for me. I used a red highlighter. I wanted to, quickly checking the back of the page to see how much ink bled through. A lot did. Black Copic and all Copic markers, they're alcohol-based, they really bleed through pages quite easily. So make sure you protect your work by putting something underneath your page in your sketchbook, or protect your desk by putting something under an illustration you're making. Yeah, you can already see how streaky the highlighter is when it goes down. I could see that right away from the beginning, and I was hoping for some reason that it would stop doing that, and it did not. Like, that was not a surprise, and yet I was still surprised. And at this point I was just like, you know what, maybe that's it, maybe I'm done, maybe I can be happy with this. And I was not. I finished filming, put my sketchbook away, and left it for about a month, and just kind of like sat on that video and was like sad about how the drawing turned out. And then I decided, you know what, why don't we try to fix it? There's got to be a way. And then I thought about just coloring over it with pencil. And that's exactly what I did. I used a red colored pencil to just cross-hatch directly over top, and I actually really loved the look of it. It was a lot darker red than I originally intended, but you could actually see the color of the highlighter underneath, but still see the texture of the pencil, and I really liked how that looked. It was very intense, very bright. I felt like the highlighter kind of acted like an underpainting, and I kind of want to experiment with a different colored highlighter as a base and then different colored pencil crayons layered over top. I feel like there's something that could be done there that could be quite cool. But yeah, if you're ever using pens or markers and they just come out kind of streaky and you want to fix it, I think using like colored pencils over top is a great solve to actually smooth out the color. And yes, I know people do this. I'm not coming up with this idea myself, but it's the first time I've tried it, to be honest. And I really liked how it looked, so. all of that to say, I think that there's opportunities when we are not happy or satisfied with the work we've done to go back and actually find a solution and fix it. Anyways, thanks so much for watching.